Noah, we are back, and we are talking about upgrading your mid-tier players that are on your roster, the viewer that is. We got these guys kicking around on some of our rosters too, but we want to get them off of our rosters and get into some better situations if we can. But before we get into it, I do hope that y'all enjoy the video. Please leave a like if you do. Comment down below some mid-tier players that you're trying to move off of. How are you moving off of them? And have you moved off some mid-tier players? We want to hear about some completed trades you've made as we creep ever closer to the regular season. It's right around the corner. But Noah, with all that said, let's get right to the content that people came for. Dive into your first mid player. Why are they mid? Why are we getting them off a roster? And what are you trying to get out of this player? What do you got?
I think he fits that term pretty well, and that's Gardner Minshew. To start, I just want to clarify, I love Gardner Minshew. He just seems like such a cool, like chill guy. Been a huge fan ever since I watched him like light up the field in Pullman, Washington in 2018. He's had some cool moments in the league too. Always rooted for his success, but reality is reality, and his game is mid. He has a hard cap skill ceiling and is just really system dependent from what I've seen. He's exactly who he is. That's something I say about players pretty often. Don't try to project them to be worse or better than what exactly you've seen them be in the past. Him being who he is, that does mean that he's better than Aiden O'Connell, which is no shock to me. And he is the starting quarterback of the Raiders this year, or at least to start. Who knows? Things can change. I think he can pretty easily be a back-end QB2 on the season. He's throwing the ball to Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers. There's really no reason why he can't do that. And I think he is good enough to do that. So, in theory, he can definitely be a starter for a team. But we know that he's not a long-term starter. Like I said, he's the starter. He just got declared that. His value is undeniably higher for the moment with that announcement. And if my quarterback room is stable right now, I just kind of had Minshew on the roster. I want to capitalize on the value increase that Minshew is experiencing right now. With that, who I want to target instead, I want to take the extra quarterback value I have, and I want to use it to bolster my running back room right as we're about to head into the season. And I want to do that with Najee Harris. I know I've talked about Najee on the channel before, but bear with me. In my research for doing this, I wanted to see what I could get for Minshew in the 2025 second, because it's kind of a similar situation I found myself in one of my leagues. My initial thought was Derrick Henry, but as I started looking at the stats, comparing the Ravens and Titans offenses from last season between Henry and Gus Edwards, I just kept seeing Najee over and over again, because I'm looking at the full list of of running backs in the league last year, and he's just there at the top every time. If Henry was at the top and Edwards was lower, or if Edwards was at the top and Henry was lower, Najee's still right there, close to the top. And just to reiterate, he had the 6th most carries in the league last year. He had the 7th most rushing yards in the league last year. And all that was in a terribly ran offense. Matt Canada is really like he's clawing at top 5, and he'll never reach Adam Gase, but he's clawing at top 5. Arthur Smith is the new OC this year, and we kind of had a bitter taste in our mouths about Arthur Smith and his time in Atlanta, but he was the offensive coordinator for, speaking of, Derrick Henry for several years in Tennessee. And not to attribute all of Henry's success to Smith, but Smith was a notable part of it. I'm sure he's going to try to use him and Warren just like he used Bijan and Algier last year. I'm not a fan of Warren's injury being to his hamstring, seeing as how he is very specifically more of a receiving back than, the power ground and pound running back. The quick shifts is what can tend to hurt the hamstring and re-aggravate it. That's why it bothers wide receivers a lot, even after they're over it. But, while Bijan did end up getting more carries by the end of the season, Algier had 40% of the teams inside the 5 attempts compared to Bijan's 20, and Najee and the Steelers offense last year had 50% of those compared to Warren's 23. Najee was also better, and here's an important point. It was also funny as I was like researching this and writing it, I was watching Ron Stewart, and he was talking about the exact same thing. But Najee was also better at zone concept type runs. And, in case you're not familiar, there's zone concept, there's man gap concept. Najee was better at the zone type runs. Warren was better at the man concept type runs. Arthur Smith much prefers zone to man. You can see that in the usage of that in Atlanta. And this will definitely show up in how they're utilized. Najee will be primed for more touchdowns and more rushing yards. He performed even within a very one-dimensional offense last year with Kenny Pickett leading that team. And you would at least think that will change with Russell Wilson this year. Najee did turn down that contract extension. Some people are a little wary about that, but that was ultimately Najee's decision to get the team to turn that down. So he is playing for money this year. He's going to put his best foot forward. He doesn't want to be done in the league. Arthur Smith doesn't care about contract stuff. He's never cared about what he's supposed to do on the business front office side of things. He's going to do what he wants to do. And I think Najee favors his type of running back more than Jaylen Warren does. Biggest argument is that Najee remains undervalued relative to what he did last year, and now he's in an even better situation. I would just try to send Minshew and a 2025 third for Najee, probably to a team that has been hamstrung by maybe the JJ McCarthy injury, or maybe even somebody who is counting on Aiden O'Connell to be their starter this year. I don't think that would be too terribly difficult. What do you think about that, Bob?
Yeah, Najee Harris is certainly, I 1,000,000% agree, undervalued right now. Somebody we could probably talk about in another upcoming segment. But I love this concept of using a mid quarterback, Gardner Minshew, to try to go get yourself in a buy low situation at a running back position. I found myself with a couple, oddly enough, extra quarterbacks kicking around because I had Sam Darnold in several leagues. I'm trying to do something just like this to bolster other positions. You don't necessarily have to go and target Najee Harris, but just utilizing this concept to take a Gardner Minshew, a Sam Darnold, whoever is a limited time starter, Jacoby Brissett, insert X name here, player who is guaranteed not to be a long-term starter. Find somebody who has some upside and can help you elsewhere. The nice thing about these guys is, all of these guys that I've just mentioned, Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Sam Darnold, have all been available on waivers in most leagues at some point over the last year and a half, 2 years, to where you could have stashed these guys and now you can kind of cash in. So, hey, what's the best thing to do with a mid-tier player? That's exactly it right there. Hopefully Gardner Minshew is extra for you, excess. Like you said, I think he could absolutely be a quarterback 3 for a team if you were desperate, 12-team super flex. But I'd much rather move on for Najee. And I'm finding myself at a shortage of running back in some leagues, so I'm trying to do exactly this. I love this point here. I think at most you maybe have to go up to a second to get Najee, but maybe you get a fourth back on top of it, something like that. But you got to factor in you're giving up a quarterback, and that usually carries some weight for people. There's a lot of folks out there who will just purely put no matter how mid the quarterback is, it's a quarterback. It's better than a running back if it's a super flex league, plain and simple. So you probably get some good leeway there. I don't think anybody's dying to hold on to Najee at this point. It sounds like everybody just wants to get him the heck off their roster. He's on a lot of trade blocks on a lot of my leagues, and I tell you what, I might come a knocking. I might come a knocking for the guy. So we'll see what happens. But some guy I'm not going to come knocking for, and somebody who I think is, I've been on this bandwagon for a bit now, I think is a bit overvalued. Tyjae Spears, valued as the running back 18 on Keep Trade Cut. I think this boils down to, I don't think he's a bad player necessarily. Mid is probably like a little aggressive for what I think he's going to be. But he's valued at a running back 18, and I think more than likely he's going to finish as a running back 3 range type player. He's set up for a Jaylen Warren role in this offense, but everybody's treating him like he's set up for a James Cook role where he's going to get most of the carries. And I think that's an awesome comparison and not a huge knock. If you look at what Jaylen Warren did last year, finishes as a running back 3, fringe running back 3, nothing terrible about that, especially the value that you got him for originally, where you're having to get him now in drafts and draft capital wise. Not something I wanted to do. And speaking of which, looking at my projections, which you get at patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, in the gold tier, updated ranks are going to be dropping at the end of this coming week, the last week of August. There will be updated projections, I should say, not rankings. But right now he's running back 37 in tier 10, which is ranges from running back 34 to 37. So he's the tail end of the tier, but he's in that range for me where it could be a very low end running back 3, very high end running back 4 at worst. So just something to think about. But meanwhile, and I'll talk about this in a future video, meanwhile, they just paid Tony Pollard, who's accustomed to larger workloads. Therefore, I have him projected as a team's lead running back. Also just got paid this offseason. Most recent investment, high investment, relatively high investment for a running back, I guess you could say. He's running back 26 in tier 7 of my projections, which ranges from running back 23 to running back 27. So while he's in line at running back 26, I haven't projected in that range. So that's kind of how that breaks down. So looking at what I target instead of going after Tyjae Spears or possibly even trading away Tyjae Spears to upgrade that mid-tier player, looking at multiple completed trades on Dynasty Daddy, sending Spears away for a first-round pick or multiple second-round picks, all about that. I think you can turn those picks if you wanted to just rinse and repeat that asset. You could do that to trade it for something better. Not everybody's going to want Spears, but everybody likes draft capital. Tyjae Spears plus to go get Travis Etienne, one of my favorite things to do with mid-tier players or players who I think are overvalued and overprojected. Use them as a launch pad to go get into a better running back situation where you're getting up to a running back 10 to 12 range. Go after a James Cook and Isaiah Pacheco. Travis Etienne's probably a little high, but it was a trade I saw where I think it was a pair of seconds on top of Tyjae Spears to go get Travis Etienne. And then speaking of the devil, we keep talking about him, but Jaylen Warren, trade Tyjae Spears for Jaylen Warren plus because I think you're getting the same numbers, and Jaylen Warren super accessible right now with his hamstring injury. The thing is yes, soft tissue issues tend to linger. However, it's not an ACL. It's not like Jaylen Warren's done for the year. It's certainly going to cap what he can do early in the season. But this is one of those, going back to some lateral tear down trades, one of the early trading methods I've talked about on this channel is going to somebody who I think is going to produce about the same. That's the lateral, but you're tearing down value-wise. Jaylen Warren is lower value than Tyjae Spears, but I think they're going to produce about the same. So that's something I'm looking to do. Move off of Tyjae Spears, go after a bunch of other options because I just think he's a little overvalued and a little overprojected. But that's just me. I don't see his, what he did, albeit, sharing the backfield with Derrick Henry last year. He's not going to have a ton of run, but I don't see him being that back when we've already seen Tony Pollard do that in some capacity. I'm not saying he's not going to do anything. He's going to get some work, but I think you're sorely going to be disappointed if you're expecting anything close to running back 2 mid to above mid running back 2 numbers for Tyjae Spears. No, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
I'm not quite as down on Spears as you are. I'm not afraid of selling him. I do think there's a possibility that he could catch 7 passes and run for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns week 1 and then capitalize on that, which I'd be all in for. But, as far as this goes, I mean, these are kind of crazy seeing some of these trades. I mean, I feel like, if you just would have asked me what I thought Spears was going for, then Jaylen Warren plus would make perfect sense to me. Someone going from ETN to Tyjae Spears plus, or even sending a first or multiple seconds. I mean, that's crazy. But I mean, people are doing it. Like, you can see like this is what's happening. So, if that is really how people are valuing him, then even though I do like Spears, I'm absolutely looking for those opportunities to sell him. My favorite one of these would probably be Spears plus to get ETM because, just in general, I feel like people never really know exactly how to feel about Travis Etienne. And so I could see them wanting to move off of ETN for, something more unknown, I guess, in Spears and this new Titans offense. So yeah, I would definitely be willing to do that. If there's any way I could go Spears and a second, to get ETN or even throw like, a little bit more on top of that, I would be happy to do that.
Good deal. We will move right along here. Talk about your next mid-tier player. As much as I like this player, and that's the thing is like, there's a lot of mid players, quote unquote, that we don't hate. We just don't expect them to produce the way some people are expecting. And that's the key here. We're looking for fantasy points, not production on an NFL field that helps real life NFL teams. We're looking for people that are going to stuff the stat sheets. Noah, why is this player mid? Why don't you talk about him? Tell us what you're looking to get instead.
The mid player I want to get off my roster here is Khalil Shakir, wide receiver for the Bills. You know, he's going to his third year of his career. He's done nothing that would align historically for a year 3 breakout. He had a 4% target share in his rookie season. He had a 9% target share last year. You know, there's people that are excited about him because, you know, he had a couple of games at the end of the season. I think it was in the playoffs where, you know, he performed pretty well, you know, pretty decently. But I do want to point out that his utilization only really went up because Gabe Davis got hurt in week 18. You know, he didn't do anything crazy enough for people to, in my opinion, really be able to look at him and, you know, genuinely say that those playoff games were enough to think that he like broke out and that, you know, he can be the primary target on the team or a primary target on the team. What did the Bills do this offseason? They went out and they signed Curtis Samuel, who has at least shown a few times in his career that he can perform on a field. Even with lackluster passing talent. They drafted Keon Coleman. They signed Mac Hollins and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you know, and those aren't exciting names. Those aren't big names, but they're signing people. And as far as I'm concerned, those are the names that I tend to align Khalil Shakir in anyways. Not to mention they have a top receiving back in the league with James Cook, and they have Dalton Kincaid, who's all but locked into being at least a top 2 target in that offense, if not the number 1. I'm cooling on some of my Curtis Samuel hype, you know, just looking at some of the preseason usage rates, which, you know, I know the other day Zach said he didn't really think preseason mattered. I do think the usage rates do indicate a lot of stuff. Those same rates don't favor Shakir either. You know, from what I'm seeing, like they're actually kind of fighting with each other for a certain role in that offense. But, you know, it seems like the Bills are happy with Coleman, Kincaid, and Cook being their main guys. And that back end party of Shakir, Samuel, Hollins, and MVS scattered on the back end to serve whatever other purpose they need. So instead of Shakir, I want to tear down to one of my favorite, like crazy, super cheap players in Davis Allen, who is a tight end for the LA Rams. You know, given your league's bench size, there is a chance that Davis Allen is just on waivers. And so if that's the case, go get him because he's free. Allen is in a great spot to get on the field in LA and carve out time for himself. Rams tight end room has been led by Tyler Higbee for the past few years. He's accumulated at least 70 targets each of the last 3 seasons. His best year came in 2022 in lieu of Kupp's injury, where he got 108 targets. Sean McVay and Matt Stafford love having a receiving tight end that is super active in their passing game. The end of last season, in case you forgot, Higbee tore his ACL and his MCL, and at very best will be returning mid-season to late season. The Rams went and signed Colby Parkinson from the Seahawks this offseason, 3-year, $22 million contract with it, which is oddly large for Colby Parkinson, as much as I love the guy. But after this season, the Rams can save money by cutting any of their tight ends, which, you know, to me, that mainly means that they're going to play whoever they think is best, and they're not going to feel obligated by anything else other than on-field talent and production. Allen vastly outsnapped Hunter Long in preseason week 1, 23 snaps to 16, and in routes run 13-8. Week 2, Long had 17 snaps to Allen's 15, but Allen ran 11 routes to Long's 9 and had 4 targets. While Parkinson is the TE1 right now, I can see Allen muscling himself into more on-field opportunities to give the Rams a good tight end that they have on contract through 2027 for next to nothing. To go from Shakir to Allen, I would want to see if I can throw out an offer of sending Shakir for Allen and a 2025 third. You know, if you're in a situation where Allen's just on waivers, then I would just try to get a 2025 third and fourth for Shakir.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Davis Allen shout. I think that's an awesome sleeper tight end pick. Just a guy I loved as a prospect. Nothing crazy to say about him or anything like that. But looking at just what you can get moving Khalil Shakir on the market right now, I mean, a second round pick is all but guaranteed. I mean, plenty of trades going down. There's one where he goes for 2 seconds, a 25 and a 26 second. I don't know what we're doing over there, but plenty of deals where Khalil Shakir is being moved off of for Jermaine Barton. I think another one here that I know you'd like, Khalil Shakir plus a third to go get Rashid Shaheed. I think you're pretty in on that deal. So, I mean, the methods
Wow.
are certainly out there. If you want to take a tier down, that's fine too. But thoughts?
I felt like I went and looked at some trades that happened. I would have never dreamed that people would be sending second round picks for Khalil Shakir, but even more so, if you can get a second round pick for a guy who's never had more than a 10% target share in his first 2 years of his career, go for it. I think some of that preseason Bills hype with no Diggs or Davis is getting to people's heads a little bit. But hey, by all means, if we're playing bigger ball than I thought we were, go get a second for him. I'm all for that. Main point being, it is easy to get him off your roster right now, and there's no real reason to keep him on your roster.
Yeah, I think too, another thing to think about, a possible reason he might be getting a little more hype is this Curtis Samuel injury he's dealing with. The turf toe is no joke. I mean, if you ask me, it's what killed AJ Green's career, and it really sent him downhill. Couldn't stay healthy towards the end. Had was hoping to come back, had turf toe, and he was done, shot. And Curtis Samuel, that's an injury that kind of sticks around. And if the usage wasn't hurting him, the usage rates weren't hurting him, that would definitely be a concern for me too. And I think I love the Coleman, Kincaid, and Cook run there. It sounds like a law firm. Coleman, Kincaid, and Cook, attorneys at law. I don't know, but either way, I also love other real life things. The point you brought up with Khalil Shakir, and this is I've been on, just kind of not a warpath, but I've been very miffed with the whole narrative of the year 3 wide receiver breakout, because
me too.
While yes, it is a real thing that happens where receivers can take a big step in year 3 and have their best year to date, there has to be breadcrumbs to that breakout, because far too often people say, oh, it's year 3, look out. This guy's done nothing. As much as I love the player, I love watching his Senior Bowl film, how quick and snappy he ran routes, this, that, the other thing. It's just not, it's not here. Yes, there's some extra opportunity with vacated targets and all that if you want to get into that. But like you said, I think they're happy with Coleman, Kincaid, and Cook, the attorneys at law, running their offense, the big 3 of their offense. And I'm fine with that too. I'd happily move off Khalil Shakir. Anywhere I still happen to have him, I think I've moved off all my shares, because I don't think I've moved off for these prices, but I know I've moved off probably in some other tier up trades and drafts and other sorts of things. So definitely all for this one, Noah. Moving on to my next mid player, and another player I'm just a little down on, who is not a bad player and not a bad player to have in your lineup as a running back 3 or 4 even, but Brian Robinson, you could certainly do worse. But in 15 games last year, he put up 13.2 PPR points per game, which was good for the 22nd best running back, which is fine. It's not going to lose you weeks. It's not going to lose you games. But I think too many people, consider that he was highly rated during the season last year, and it was because he had a late bye week. He hadn't missed any games. So while other running backs are missing games and having bye weeks, Brian Robinson's just cruising along, putting up at least some points every week, where he was a top 10 running back at one point, maybe even as high as top 5 after a big blow-up game. But so you have these extra games that accrue, and people, I think, just kind of forget to go back and be like, well, man, his season really wasn't that impressive. And you look at, trying to look at what upside he might have. Last year, he was the 28th most targeted running back on the regular season, while having an intended target share. So if everybody was healthy, the shares that they would have, figuring all the games, etc., 7.84%. So nothing crazy. Now they've added Austin Eckler, and he's old and washed. I get that, but he's very likely to factor into this receiving game some way, somehow. We also know mobile quarterbacks also very frequently steal rushing touchdowns from their running back. So if you want Jaden Daniels to be a great thing and want to put him on this pedestal because he's a rushing quarterback, you got to almost demote Brian Robinson, and especially a running back that isn't a top tier one that can kind of overcome what I believe some running backs can with mobile quarterbacks. I just don't think Brian Robinson is that. This offense should be better for it with Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury in this new regime, this new era in the Commanders offense. But I don't expect Brian Robinson to benefit much, if at all, from it, given the additions. And this is noted in my projections as well. Have him down as running back 34 in tier 10, between running back 34 and 37. Keep in mind, I know that's pretty low, but these tiers are split by 1 point. Tier 11 is scoring 1 more point per game. One less point. Tier 9 is scoring 1 more point per game. So it's not a far cry to get a jump tiers. You get what I'm saying? So again, I want to use this as a launch pad. Let me use Brian Robinson to tier up into the top 10 or so of dynasty running backs, guys like Kyron Williams, Saquon Barkley, Isaiah Pacheco, even, who I think is still pretty attainable if you're throwing Brian Robinson around. People are still afraid of him being a seventh round pick, despite having 2 very good years of production at this point. I think you throw that out the window. But why am I looking to move up? These guys are actually impactful assets that I think can help me win a championship, where to me, Brian Robinson is just a lineup clogger. I mean, yes, he's an asset that's probably fine for depth, fine to have as your, break glass in case of an emergency, running back 3 or 4. And he's not hard to get. He's not expensive by any stretch of the imagination. You can do worse than Brian Robinson. I've said that already. But to go get those players, you probably need to add a first to Brian Robinson to get it done, or a player of similar value to a first-round pick. I know I don't always love moving a first-round pick, especially at this point in the season. Maybe if I'm more established mid-season, willing to throw that first-round pick around. If I'm, a locked-in, quote-unquote, playoff team, more willing to throw it in. But maybe you're more willing to throw on some player depth. You have guys like Jaden Reed, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. As much as I love him, somebody to throw in to go get one of those top running backs, something I'm about to, and Xavier Worthy are just some names that come to mind. Players in that value range of that, top end wide receiver 3 value range is kind of what I'd be looking to deal along with Brian Robinson to hopefully get up into that top 12 range of running backs. No lower than like Kenneth Walker, who I think is just very good and still young for what he gives you. It's going to be good running back 2 numbers. Brian Robinson, I think, is just lower than that. And I think there's less upside for Brian Robinson as a whole. No, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you're with me on this one, if you want to pivot off Brian Robinson as well, or if you have a different opinion. I know some people on the channel love Brian Robinson and some of the Commanders offense, but where are you at on this one, Noah?
Let's just say that I'm sad that your 2 mid players you want to get rid of are 2 of my more preferred mid players. And I can admit that they're mid. I can definitely admit that they're mid, but I like them. And I think it's just because I don't like having superstar running backs on my team. So these players like Brian Robinson, they're like gold for me.
Sure.
I just like to stack up those receivers. But no, I mean, you make good points. The only pushback I would really have is that this is a completely new team this year. Sure. Brand new offense. It's not that stale garbage or whatever we got from Eric Bieniemy last year, which that whole stint still confuses me and blows my mind at the same time. But yeah, they have Eckler. I'm a little bit higher on Eckler this season than most people are. I definitely think he's going to be involved in the receiving game, and especially now considering that Jahan Dotson is gone. If we want to talk about vacated targets, we could talk about Eckler there too. Sure. But I'm not the biggest fan on vacated target theory. But yeah, I think Brian Robinson is fine. Just like you said, he can be a starter, but I do think with the excitement of this new team and this new offense, and we even got a tweet today of Cliff Kingsbury talking about how he sees Brian Robinson as being a very clear RB1. There's a chance that you can go out and tier up from Brian Robinson into someone like Kyron. Mm-hmm. If I'm wanting to do a tier up, I'm probably not trying to go into an older guy like Barkley. Someone like Kyron, I would love to do it. I'm a little too stubborn to move off of JSN or Worthy, sure, but I'm not too stubborn to move off of Jaden Reed. I would be down to pair a first with Brian Robinson or Jaden Reed with Brian Robinson, and then maybe even a third if I had to move up to Kyron. While I'm not like the biggest Kyron fan, I definitely think that he's a top 10 guy and he should remain a top 10 guy for at least another year or two. If he's not a top 10 guy with the Rams, he can be a really good guy for somebody else. I'm in on that. I definitely think that that's a deal that could get done. I think for some reason I feel like it'd be kind of hard to pair him with a player to get that done, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I could see that, especially these players because they're a little like younger. They're not super towards like I mean, I guess if you're moving out of Brian Robinson, you're not necessarily because my thing with Brian Robinson is if I'm trying to win a championship, I don't think and maybe I don't have like a good running back one already, like a true blue top 10 producing running back. That's where I'm really trying to make this deal. If you already have a guy like a Kyron or a Saquon, obviously you can't trade for them, but I don't feel as inclined. Like if he's chilling as my running back 4, I have other good running backs already. I'm not super concerned. I'm thinking, like you said, with that tweet that came out that, oh, he's and running back 1 and RB1. Too many people are going to take that as, oh, he can be a running back 1 for fantasy. And it's like, well, no, he's just a running back 1 on a football team, which isn't bad. But like I said, that's where you can kind of use some of the smoke to your advantage and, make a player bend to your will a little bit with what you do with them. But Noah, you got another one. This one hurts my heart a little bit. As much as he's now on a rival team, I don't care about that. This guy's been so exciting to watch for many, many years in not my hometown, but my home team of the Green Bay Packers. Noah, who do you got? Why is he mid now? What are you looking to get instead?
We do have to admit that Aaron Jones is coming to the end of his time in the league. And, he's going to be turning 30 later this season. And he slowed down noticeably in the past 2 years, partially because of injuries, and he's had some flashes of his old self. But I think we can very clearly see all of it waning for him. He's on a 1-year contract in Minnesota right now. And to be honest with you, I'm not even convinced he'll be the best fantasy running back in Minnesota this season. Interestingly enough, and this kind of even relates to the Austin Eckler take that we had, and you could even point toward Spears and Pollard as well. Dwayne McFarland shared on Twitter the other day that I believe he's one of the guys with Fantasy Life, but shared on Twitter the other day that running backs on new teams have a pretty notable tendency to not perform nearly as well as running backs that remain with their same team from last year. And that's another reason. What do you got?
Real quick, I'm just curious if that notes situations where the new running backs are coming into an existing system. Because if I feel like, and this is not doing any research on this point, this is my curiosity kicking in. If it's a new system for everybody versus a system that incumbent running back was already in, then I could for sure that would just kind of make sense. It's obviously older running backs in general, but I'd just be curious to know if that is noted at all. That like, hey, even though it's a new system, new coordinators, whatever the case is, like Ty Chandler, like this would make a lot of sense for Aaron Jones because he's coming into a new system, but Ty Chandler's been in this system, so he should have kind of the leg up on what's going on. Although I would argue Aaron Jones going to Kevin O'Connell's system from the same tree as Matt LaFleur-ish, I believe, same kind of coaching ideology.
There you go.
But so just curious. I don't know if that's noted in there, but that just set off curious sprinklers in my head, whatever that is.
But I do think that was probably an across the board stat. And, I would be interested to make a breakdown of, teams with completely new systems or teams with, existing systems as well. I would think that it would be just my thought process. I think that it would be the same regardless, just because when they've been on a team and they stay on that team, all of the other players or most other players are the same. The coaches are the exact same, and they have figured out how to craft that guy to their exact offense and system. And so whether or not they're coming into an incumbent coaching and team situation or one that's very different, it's still people that don't know that player specifically and aren't familiar with utilizing him specifically.
Sure.
So, but that is a good point, and I would be interested to see that. Either way, Aaron Jones, I want him off my roster. I think Todd Chandler is going to make some noise this season. We'll see. So, who am I targeting instead? I would prefer to tier up to Raheem Mostert. While it's almost certainly a guarantee that Mostert isn't going to have a season like he did last year, he has fallen in ADP way too much for me in this offseason. He's lower than Aaron Jones on all platforms, as much as 40 spots lower on ESPN and as few as 10 on Underdog. And that's across all positions, by the way, too, not running backs. Does that sound right to you? Because I don't think that it sounds right to me.
I could see him being a little lower, but like 40 spots, that's 3 rounds lower. That's kind of surprising. But
yeah,
I mean, depending on the round, I guess you could argue maybe they just don't feel like targeting running back anymore with how many they've drafted already. I guess that could play a role, kind of board scarcity, but it still sounds low to me. I feel like I would draft Mostert before I drafted Aaron Jones, but
yeah,
I would understand seeing Aaron Jones regularly above Raheem Mostert. But because of Devon Achane versus, you compare backfields, Devon Achane is much more of a threat than, no offense to Ty Chandler, than Ty Chandler is. So it would make sense that there'd be some discrepancy there, but that's a pretty big one. I'm surprised to see it be that much, personally.
Yeah, I mean, no part of me thinks that Aaron Jones should have a better fantasy season this year than Mostert. I mean, I know Achane was hurt, and yeah, I'm not trying to draw any kind of comparison between Achane and Chandler either. But I guess the way that I see it is, and even what I have noted here, like I'm sure that the big part of this reason is because we are looking at Aaron Jones as the RB1 for the Vikings and Raheem Mostert as the RB2 for the Dolphins.
Right.
But just because you're at the top of your team's depth chart doesn't mean that you're better than somebody else. Like Devonta Smith is the wide receiver 2 for the Eagles, but I'd probably take him over some of the best wide receivers for another team. But again, part of the reason is because Achane exists. It's also probably because Jalen Wright is a member of that team now, and people think that he could slot right into Mostert's type of role in the offense. But both of these offenses, I think that they project to have a notable time split between their running backs. It's not like the Dolphins are going to give a 70% workload to Achane, and I doubt that the Vikings do that with Aaron Jones either. So there's going to be some splits, but honestly, I would rather bet the player from the better offense who had an incredible season last year will score more fantasy points than the guy who had a worse season last year and is with the worst team of the two this season.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I going from Aaron Jones to Raheem Mostert? In theory, since Jones' ADP is higher on every platform, this should technically be a tier down, which makes this the perfect trade for me. Because like I said earlier, I see this as a tier up. I would rather have Mostert on my team than Jones. And just a reminder, I know that Mostert's like 2 years older than Jones, maybe even 3, but Jones on a 1-year contract, and I could see him falling into oblivion after this year. Maybe a backup for maybe like an Austin Eckler on the Commanders, somewhere next season. Yeah, I would be happy with a 1-for-1 swap, but for the sake of that being bad practice, I would send an offer of Aaron Jones for Mostert and a 4th. And if I got Mostert over Jones, regardless of the pick, I would be really happy with that.
Yeah, I like that as well. And just touching on the age difference, you have to think Aaron Jones a lot more miles than Raheem Mostert at the end of the day, because Raheem Mostert for the first several years of his career never had consistent carries until he broke out with 49ers and eventually came to Miami. Just never had a large rushing share. While he's older, less wear on the tires. That said, I'm with it. I don't hate this move at all. I'm also a Raheem Mostert fan for this offseason. And I get pivoting off Jones. He's, started out his career as well with some injuries, hasn't really stayed super healthy, and you don't usually see running backs get more healthy as they age. So, and big thing to note, you noted that it's going to be the better team this year is Miami, most likely because of the quarterback situation. This Minnesota offense could be above average, what we expect from Sam Darnold, but it could also be a train wreck.
Abysmal.
Yeah, it could be very rough to watch.
Just to your point, I just looked it up. Aaron Jones has had 503 more rushing attempts in his career than Raheem Mostert.
That's nothing to
And that doesn't include
about 2 years.
Yeah, that's not even touches. That's just rushes because we know how many catches Aaron Jones has had. So
true. That's a good point. Great addition.
On to the last guy.
On to the last one, pivoting. Same division.
I don't like this one, by the way. So
really?
We're good on this one. Yeah, I don't like this guy.
You don't like him.
I don't like this guy. No.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. All right. Cole Kmet, tight end for the Chicago Bears. Another player that I don't hate by any stretch. I think he's a talented enough player, but you look at the mouths to feed in this offense. You have DJ Moore, who's been a wide receiver 1 alpha type target getter. You have Keenan Allen, who's been an alpha wide receiver 1 target getter. Now you have a first round wide receiver pick who is expected to be an alpha, somewhat of an alpha target getter. And then you have Cole Kmet, who is, yes, on a good contract, has shown well in the past, has had more of a target share to work with, hasn't had a lot of competition for targets in this offense. He's been the second receiving option for the most part in this offense. Now you also have DeAndre Swift coming into the mix, who pulled over 50 targets last year in the Eagles offense. So it's hard for me to expect that Cole Kmet is going to be much of anything. He's buried in the targets pecking order, assuming everyone stays healthy. Obviously, if Keenan Allen misses the season, I still don't love Cole Kmet because I still think he's, going to be the third or fourth option then, which isn't that much better at tight end. But we want our tight ends to at least be the second receiving target in their offense. Best case scenario, you can't get that with every tight end, obviously. But Cole Kmet, just going to get buried at this point. And, if I'm looking to who I target instead, if I'm trying to compete, let me tier up to an Evan Ingram or David Njoku. And if I'm looking at next year and I have that issue of a kind of mid tight end, granted, Cole Kmet could end up better over the course of time, with how this receiving room shakes out. I still think, DJ Moore just got locked down. Rome Odunze's there for 5 years, probably. I don't see a lot of light at the end of the tunnel for Cole Kmet to be a target getter in this offense. So unless it's going to be extremely high powered, hey, it could happen. Stranger things have happened. But let me tier up or tier down, whatever you want to call it, points wise this year. Cole Kmet might score more than TJ Hockenson, but getting into a top 5 tight end option like a TJ Hockenson when healthy, something I definitely want to do. I know we just trash talked the Vikings offense, but that just gives you even more access to TJ Hockenson over the course of the season if you're looking to next year, because you're going to have a guy scoring points. You're going to have a guy who's healthy, provided no injuries happen. Obviously, that should go without saying, but just to throw it out there so somebody in the comments is like, well, if he gets injured, it's not going to happen. But you get it. Moving on. Give me TJ Hockenson. You probably have to add at least a second round pick to Cole Kmet. Depending on who you're talking to, I know there's still people out there who are in on Cole Kmet this year, and I can't do it. I have him projected. I think I should have put it on here. I have him projected, I think, around like the tight end 16 range. And that was after I buffed him to make him better, because I'm like, man, that feels real low to have him with the likes of some, second string tight end, like I'd say a Likely or something. I felt bad having him as low as I did, but hey, man, there's tight end is kind of a good position right now, a good-ish position right now. We have some fun tight ends and fun offenses. We have kind of this influx we've had with Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid. Now we have Brock Bowers coming along. Kyle Pitts is supposed to be like prime Kyle Pitts now, finally. So, it's a tough world to be in, and it's a good time to get off of a mid-tier tight end. I talked about Dallas Goedert last time on this podcast. Same thing, where I want to move off of him. I want to move off Cole Kmet. I want top 10 production out of both of my tight ends. I want to kind of corner the market if I can on tight end, at least one of them. So if you have 2 Cole Kmets on your roster, not playing a dupes league or anything like that, but if you have 2 Cole Kmet level players on your roster, find a way to get off of one and upgrade the best you can, because I think you're going to be sorely disappointed this year. Feel free to add anything on Cole Kmet before we get the heck on out of here, Noah.
I mean, honestly, Bob, you didn't even bring up the absolute worst part of Cole Kmet. You also said, hey, there are some people out there that's still in on Cole Kmet. Well, I can tell you one thing. Those people are not Seattle Seahawks fans, because if they were, they would know that the offensive coordinator for the Bears this season is
Good
the
point.
fantasy tight end killer, because he utilizes tight ends well. And that's Shane Waldron, by the way, for an real on the field NFL offense, but you will not get fantasy production out of a Shane Waldron tight end. Not to mention, they also brought in Gerald Everett, and he's not a skillless individual himself. So I think Cole Kmet is dead in the water for all I'm concerned. I would try to get him off of my roster no matter what. He's going to go down in the ranks like crazy this year. So I'm all in on this. If you wouldn't have talked about him, I would have talked about him. But yeah, if I could pair Kmet with a second to go get TJ Hawkinson and continue to buy on that injury dip, which I don't always love doing, but I mean, it's TJ Hawkinson, and I'm still a believer in TJ Hawkinson, even though he's hurt. I would definitely do that.
I'm very glad that you brought up the tight end usages out of the offensive coordinator. Yeah, didn't even. I think so frequently about how much Shane Waldron screwed JSN, and here we are, and why I think he's going to be bad for Rome Odunze too. Completely forgot how much he obliterates the tight end position in the last 3 years. Intended target share at the tight end position, and intended target share is almost always higher because it factors out of time of injury, as opposed to taking. He had 82 targets, but he missed 6 games. It would obviously mess with that. So factoring in what it would be match up with the total games, tight end 1 for Shane Waldron in the last 3 seasons, target share, intended target share, 8.11%. Not a lot of good tight ends performing at that rate. 11.48% in 2022. In 2021, 14.6%. Watch out. But these are not tight end 1 target share numbers. And granted, Cole Kmet's target share has been halfway decent. He has not had a bad target share over the course of his career. Last year, 19.34% intended target share. Intended target share in 2022, 20.18%, 17.59% in 2021. But the usage is going to come down to the offensive coordinator. And between all of the other things that you're mixing in here with the wide receivers, DeAndre Swift going to get some run in the receiving work as well, I imagine. So it's rough, man. That's a great addition. Factoring in that offensive coordinator. So great point, great addition. But let me add a second round pick to Cole Kmet. Let me figure out my tight end room that much more. Give me somebody a little more productive. I don't love David Njoku with Deshaun Watson because I think he's so kind of strung on if that pans out. But Evan Ingram is an easy pivot. Somebody a little older. And somehow, some way, it feels like Mark Andrews is still attainable. You'd have to obviously add more than a second to Cole Kmet. You're probably adding a first-round pick, maybe even a little more on top of that to go get Mark Andrews. But it feels like everybody just hates Mark Andrews now. He's down to like tight end 6 or 7 on most formats. And I just, I get we have this, and I talked about it, we have this, this youth movement at the tight end position where we have Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta. But Mark Andrews is still a very damn good tight end. And I know he hasn't been super healthy. He wasn't super healthy last year. He's been banged up over time, but he's a feature in that offense. I mean, he's as good as it can get. He's only 28. He'll be 29 this year, I believe. But hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That is Michael Scott quote there for sure. Not anybody else. Take your shot, man. Go knock on some doors. There's no harm in asking. You never know. You never know what your league mates are going to say till you ask. And that's one thing I cannot harp on enough is don't look at a trade and be like, oh, they'll never accept this, because I've done that. And then I've ended up sending the trade anyway, and it gets accepted. Who's the dummy there? Maybe it's me. But at least I sent that trade and got that trade done. But with all that said, I hope you guys go get some trades done. And I hope you get the mid-tier players off of your rosters, get yourself in some better situations some way, somehow. And I hope you check out the Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in there for a free 7-day trial. Like this video, comment down below some mid-tier players you're trying to move off of. But with all that said, Noah and I are going to get the heck on out of here. We'll see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.